Well, what is it? It's October 18th, 2022. I decided I wanted to talk a little bit about Sober October. I jumped on the Sober October bandwagon uh, with Joe Rogan and them, with them. I don't know how to say it. Inspired by them. Which, I mean, for me, uh, Sober October was great. I think, when they started doing it, I kind of saw it as like a nice opportunity to kind of accept the challenge to do it myself. Because it's probably been 4 years of Sober October. And I remember just, gathering up all your paraphernalia. And for me, what did I do? I literally put it in a drawer in the basement because that's like a thing. I think it's like if you want to stop doing something, you need to put like a lot of effort in between you and the thing. So, if, like, so say you smoke weed all the time and you have your pipe out and your grinder out and it's all 5 seconds away, you're gonna have a hard time quitting because it's right there, right in front of you. And whatever trigger it is, if your trigger is sitting on the couch, your bowl's in the side drawer, you pack a bowl when you sit down on your couch. If that's your trigger, like you're just gonna do it unless you disrupt that trigger and that pattern. So the idea is to make it really inconvenient and out of reach. I might have even went so far as to give it to my sister and let her have my paraphernalia. That first month, I think I actually did give it to my sister. And I just was like, here, just have my pipe and my paraphernalia out of the house. And, a month is good. You could do a month. And at least for me, like, you really learn that weed isn't that physically addictive. Like, there's no withdrawals or anything. For that the first couple of months, or maybe in the first 3 Sober Octobers, depending where I was employment time at the basis, it did seem like, yeah, I got rid of smoking and drinking, but scrolling and like porn probably went up a little bit. Definitely scrolling went up a little bit. So it is funny to be like, I'm doing Sober October, but really I'm just gonna not do these vices and then accentuate these other vices. So it is funny how it kind of evens out. So like your total amount of vice stays the same, but at least you're kind of hammering down. I think I do remember. It had to be 2018. I think I took a level 1 improv class again, and I remember like saying that. I remember saying like, "Oh, I'm doing Sober October," and like the mood shifted. Like, I don't know if it like completely implied that I had like a horrible problem that I had to do a Sober October thing. Which, like, I don't know. I guess some people could argue that I did have a problem, and some people could, rationalize that it really wasn't a huge problem. But I do remember like being like, "Oh yeah," like, and then I'm doing Sober October this year, and I just, I felt the energy change. And then now that some of it's coming back to me, I do remember going, like, it must have been after graduation or after whatever. You usually do a show at the end of an improv class. So I remember at the end of the show of the final show, going over to a local bar and someone being like, 1 beer is still sober. It's like, yeah, it was like, and that's how fucking drug addiction works is you rationalize it. It's like, okay, well, I'm not getting super fucked up, so I'm still sober. And maybe in some, I would argue, yeah, if the challenge wasn't to not drink at all, 1 beer would be pretty sober, but 1 beer isn't not drinking at all. So that was my first Sober October. Sober October. And I think the second one was anticlimactic too. I don't think I had to give my stash over to my sister. I think I just put it in the basement that year. There was an old dresser in the basement, and I put it in one of the drawers. And then 2020 Sober October was really weird. Yeah, okay. So this might be the 5th Sober October. I don't even know. 2020 was really weird because we were all locked down at that time, or it was like half lockdown. And I remember, just Joe and the gang didn't do it that year because I guess they couldn't all get together and like make make a whole challenge out of it, which is really cool. I wish I do try and promote. I do try and let the people like in my like immediate circle know about it because like because who knows, that little bit of, oh, I have a buddy doing it with me might go a long way. So I do try and let people know, like, to take this opportunity to just give up something that might be like maybe you really like but maybe holding you back in some ways too. A little double-edged sword. You get the good and the bad, so maybe you just give it up and see what it feels like. So I do kind of let people know, but I remember, I'm pretty lenient on myself with the sober October. I think more than one my sober Octobers have started on October 2nd and not October 1st, which is funny. You tell people, so it's like, so you failed immediately. It's like, yeah, but I'm gonna go to November 2nd, so fuck you. And I make I make the rules for me. So if I want to start a day late, for me it's really that 31 days, no smoking, no drinking. If I'm slow on the get up, as long as I stick it out, it's a self-imposed challenge that I do myself. So some of that finer detail isn't worth throwing away this good thing that you're doing for yourself by cutting back on substances that either eat up your time, your money, and potentially your health. I'll just clear the air on that. But yeah, back to the 2020 sober October. But I do remember, I think I was so fucked up. My sleeping schedule was so fucked up. I stayed up for 24 hours. I ate a gummy. The world was so in like a THC gummy, and the world was so in shambles. And then I remember like just the idea that even Joe Rogan was falling off, like, the wagon, like the discipline wagon. Like even that was just a bad omen for the time. I was like, oh shit, if even like, and yeah, okay, like if even this one guy, is a huge positive influence on the world, if even he's losing his edge for this month, it just symbolized so much of the degradation of, I guess, society to be in my altered state. And I remember being like, oh my God, I gotta fucking at Joe Rogan on Instagram and have him convince everyone not to be on the internet for until the election was coming up, so it was like extra crazy. So we gotta at Joe Rogan and have him convince the entire world not to be on the internet for like a couple months because we're about to fucking self implode. That's what I thought was gonna happen. And boy, so I was really fucking high. I don't think I ended up sending that message. I think somehow I had enough wherewithal not to, but I do, in like my sleep deprived, fucking baked state, I do remember being like, oh shit, if even Joe Rogan's fallen off, that's not a good sign. And I think he did get jump on late for his fans. Because I think a lot of fans felt how I felt. Or, I think there's a lot of people who take the opportunity to do Sober October, and once you do it a couple times, it becomes something you kind of look forward to, especially if you're like down on yourself. If you feel like, you feel a little hungover in August, and you're like, oh, what am I doing with my life? I just like, there's beer cans everywhere. You're like, what am I doing with my life? And then you can just say, well, at least in October, this one aspect of my life is going to be cleaned up, even if it's just for a temporary amount of time. So I think that's like, a little beacon of light. And, you do Sober October 12 years in a row. That's a year sober. With 11 months. Yeah, I know. It's still. I ultimately think it was a huge turnaround in a lot of my relationships, in my relationship with drugs and alcohol. Jordan Peterson says something like that I think really applies to Sober October. That's like, if you want to like progress in life, sometimes you have to give up the thing you love most. And then there was a time in my life where the thing I loved most was 100% marijuana. I don't ever think there was a time in my life where the thing I loved most was alcohol, but you need the contrast. And there was times in my life where I was drinking consistently, and it's almost funny how alcohol works, because like you drink on the weekend, and then you're hungover on Monday, and then you don't drink during the week, and then the weekend comes around. But it's like, but if you drink all the time, you could, I don't know, you think you can still function. It's a weird it's a weird drug, and I don't know how people seem to be able to do it constantly and aren't like just feeling like shit, acting shittily, because I know me, even on like a light hangover, it sucks. I must just be extra sensitive to it or not hydrated enough for it. But I actually really I stopped. I didn't drink all of September either, which is big. I think like the most I've made it is usually 45 days, so I'm probably over the 45-day mark on alcohol technically. And I might have to go through to November too. No drinking. Because I think I have to do not November. Not that like I have a huge porn problem. I just have a really bad dating life, and I do think whatever release you get from the like insane variety that you get from porn or whatever itch that's scratching is kind of dulling my aggression in my dating life, which I've been, obviously, if you've listened to the past couple of episodes, I've been kind of focusing on that a lot, and I've been going out every weekend and put myself out there, trying to be more talkative and trying to get my look and my style a little bit more put together. Trying to be filled with a little bit more of the type of bullshit that girls like. But I can tell that even takes a little bit of a drain on me. Because it's like, it's fun to have things to say that are interesting, but I've just held so much pride in the idea, or I'm just very attached to the idea that authenticity is the way to like fulfillment or success, like, and to be full of bullshit. I think it causes cognitive dissonance. So I'm gonna have to deal with that, or I'm just gonna have to come up with my own routines that are true to me, and then maybe you can throw in a little bit of stupid chick bait, like the horoscopes, stories about spells, or fucking palm reading, stuff that's just like kind of cheeky, fun, entertaining chick bait. Okay, where am I? Okay, and then so then those were the first three, and then last sober October was actually the best sober October to date. This sober October is mid. But last sober October, on the note of how many times can I say Joe Rogan in an episode, we'll say it probably about 10 more times. So buckle up. Last sober October, my challenge was to be more like Joe Rogan. Okay, it was to do sober October, do stand-up comedy, start doing jujitsu, and that was a year ago. So I've been doing stand-up comedy and jujitsu for a year, and then later that month, about halfway through the month, I ran into a friend who started doing yoga. And, Joe's always talking about how much he loves yoga. So at the end of the month there, I added yoga. So by the end of the month, I was insanely, insanely busy. And I mean, honestly, I probably wouldn't have been able to be so busy if it wasn't for still living with my folks, because that like took care of a lot of the maintenance stuff. Well, mainly just the food maintenance stuff, but that's a huge time chunk, is cooking and shopping for food. So and then at the end of September or the beginning of October, my yoga studio moved, and it's just too far away to be doing it twice a week on the weekdays. I drove out there once, and it's just like it's a good amount of highway driving, and it's like that's not what I want to be doing right after when I come home from work, is flying down the highway to make a class, and maybe because it's fall that has something to do with it too, because it's just gonna be driving down the highway in pitch black. So that kind of sucks. But I did that for a year. I actually just came back from a BJJ class, and man, I am not a natural at BJJ, and it's so humbling to just be made well. Because sometimes you think, oh, I train a little bit. Oh, or at least sometimes I think that. Oh, maybe I have a chance. Maybe I have a little bit of these skills. But then you just find someone who just fucking crushes you, and you're not it, kid. That's really what it is you're not it. Maybe if you could add 20 pounds of muscle, you'd be it, and train for another year diligently. But right now, I am not it. But it was a good year, and it all started off with my idea of just emulating some of the hobbies that Joe Rogan promoted. And I will say this in the vein of the authenticities. I was like, oh, Aaron, well, that's not very authentic if you're just gonna copy what Joe Rogan does. And I will say only one of those three things weren't in my wheelhouse or on my bucket list before I started listening to Joe Rogan. I was always into yoga. I always had the dream to do stand-up comedy. BJJ, I would never have done if it wasn't for Joe Rogan. So that's the truth. So, and that's okay. Getting out of the comfort zone. I don't know if I have the fucking aggression. But it's like, you don't need the aggression if you have the strength and the skill. Are you going to get the strength and the skill, Aaron? I don't know. And now this sober October, it hasn't, I thought it would be like the fucking bee's knees. But I've only trained a couple times this month, which sucks. I mean, I've been doing this. I haven't cut back on the stand-up in any way, shape, or form. And actually, I have 2 extra shows this month. So that's not nothing. But, I really thought I'd be like, oh, I'm a year into this new lifestyle. Everything's amazing. But it's just kind of like, is what it is. And who knows? Who knows how I'll feel in 13 days, in a couple of weeks. Maybe I'll feel great about it. It's like I'm doing it. There was a big voice in the back of my head. It's like, oh, you don't have to do it this year. But it's like, no, like, who cares? So what? So you can be fucking a little stoned? So yeah, that's my sober October rundown. I wish I could get more people in my life to do it with me. And I wish we could add like a challenge or something. Like Joe, Bert, Tom, and Ari do. But right now I just am kind of doing it in spirit with them, with my own rules and my own caveats. And each time, whatever hooks marijuana and alcohol have in me, I think they damper a little bit. And it's easier to go a day or a week without those substances the rest of the year. And it's like when you smoke so much and that becomes such a part of your life, like you don't want to go away for a long time. You think maybe you think about going on a trip to a different country, but then in your back of your mind you're like, oh, but I can't smoke pot. So it definitely holds you back. It definitely held me back a lot in my 20s. So I'm glad to kind of slowly and surely diminish its power on me, because I still see some of my friends who smoke all the time, and I still get to, and sometimes when I get together with my old friends who smoking was one of our main events, I'm like kind of filled with dread. I'm just kind of like, oh, we're just sitting around, like I feel it's so do nothing. Not that I'm not do nothing. Not that I'm not like sometimes doing completely frivolous things, but there was just definitely times where I valued weed more than friendships and other experiences, and that in those moments of my life, I now see that my priorities were completely fucked up. So better late than never, man. Better late than never. So yeah, I would recommend give something up. So give something up for a month. It doesn't have to be sober October, but do it for a couple years in a row, in a row, because things take so much time. Like I wish I was listening to not PewDiePie, Mr. Beast on Infamous 2, and he just talks about how obsessed he was for 7 years before, like, just studying YouTube. And it's like, I wish I could be obsessed with something. I wish I could be obsessed with something like fucking Mr. Beast is. But alas, I have ADD, and I do things for at most 18 months, and then I do something else. And that is my curse. Curse of never getting good at anything. So it's a pretty bad curse. Being a jack of all trades, and by a jack I mean a gym of all trades.